Hello, and welcome to another Look with Christian King. Today, I want to do a preview show for UFC 225. I would like to do these for a lot of the main cards, the ones that have more than 4 fights on them that I'm really excited about. I won't do every card. I do have a full-time job. Speaking of which, I will also be doing this. This is going to be a first reaction type of thing for me. At some point, maybe I will be able to use some video component and do some more detailed breakdowns and analysis, but at the end of the day, I'm not a professional coach or fighter, so I'm not the most qualified person to do that. And anyways, Faraz Sahabi does from TriStar does very good breakdowns and stuff. He would be someone much more qualified to do that. And I also don't have time to be watching a bunch of tape. Like I said, I do work full time. So I spend enough time looking at a computer at work as it is without watching fight breakdown or fight tape every day when I get home. So I will just be giving my kind of first take on fights. If I am not very familiar with the fight, I am a very hardcore fan. I do know all the fighters, but I'm not going to try and just pretend that I have a pick or an opinion on a fight that I really don't. So I will skip over some, and I will be doing the odds after talking about each fight, and I will be using bestfightodds.com, which shows several different sites and shows the different odds on this site, on these different betting sites, so we can go over the odds, and I can kind of, first I'm going to give my opinion, and then we'll go over the odds, and so this is just kind of going to be a little brief thing for each fight, not going to go into an insane amount of detail, but just have a little fun with it, and hopefully we'll do this again in the future. Alright, so we're going to start off UFC 225. Alright, the first fight is I believe it's Dan Ige versus Mike Santiago. I'm aware of both these guys. I'm not overly familiar with their games. I haven't watched tape on them, so I'm going to kind of go over that one. Clay Guida versus Charles Oliveira. The short end of this one would be that I think there's a very likely chance that Guida gets submitted going for a takedown. Charles Oliveira has very sneaky ways of taking the back off of people trying to take him down. He also has nasty guillotines. He got Miles Jury. As soon as they clenched up, he wrapped up his neck. He was able to transition to the back on Will Brooks. So he's just very good at defending a takedown, turning it into an offensive jiu-jitsu opportunity. So I do think that Charles Oliveira is likely to get the submission here. I would probably guess guillotine. Clay Guida, his thing is wrestling, but he doesn't really just, take guys down and stall on top of them. That's not his style, and especially training with Team Alpha Male, they kind of have that rinse and repeat style where they go for a takedown, go for a submission. They might lose the submission, but that's okay. They'll go for another takedown after that. So I don't expect him just to stall this one out, and good luck doing that with someone as active off their back as Charles Oliveira. But Oliveira did have a pretty rough defeat last time out against Paul Felder. He got elbowed into the canvas. It was also a little bit upsetting because the ref, I don't remember exactly who it was. I don't want to say anyone's name in case I'm wrong. So the ref missed a tap. He tapped, and the ref just didn't really see it, and Paul Felder just hit him with a few more good elbows after he'd already tapped, which is just rough to see for a guy, and those were hard shots. So, he could be a little bit gun shy or a little bit fearful. He could maybe panic if he gets on the bottom, but Guida's just not really a super dangerous finisher. He finished Joe Lozon, but Joe Lozon is towards the latter end of his amazing career and not nearly as durable as he was once legendary for. So I do think that I don't think that Guida is just a finisher like Paul Felder is. He's just not that vicious. So I would say that I think that Charles Oliveira by submission, guillotine, possibly round 1. So let's take a look at the odds now. All right, let me go to this. Charles Oliveira is the favorite at -155, and Clay Guida is the underdog at +135. And that's on 5 dimes, and no odds on BetDSI, or at least not showing here. Let's see, Bovada has Charles Oliveira at -160 and Guida at +130. I wouldn't really bet on this fight. It's pretty close. I don't have any prop bets available, unfortunately. At some point, I would like to do that. If I had prop bets available, I would look into Charles Oliveira by first round submission. I don't have that available, so maybe in the future we'll go a little more in depth. But for now, let's move on to the next fight. All right. Oh, I also wanted to add in that part of my my whole introduction thing, talking about my meaning behind doing this and how it's just kind of going to be a brief preview, and I'm not going to be doing super analytical breakdown, especially not without a video component at the moment. So I just also wanted to add in the fact that I am doing this show. I'm going to try and do these shows about usually on the Sunday or Monday night before fight week. So a full 6-5 nights out from fights for these pay-per-views. And part of why I want to do that is because I don't want to listen. I am a fan of other podcasts, other people who talk about MMA, even if it's just a guest on Joe Rogan's podcast and they're having one of the JRE MMA shows. And I want to make sure that I'm not absorbing anything that I'm hearing other people say. I want to make sure I'm giving my own organic opinion. So that's part of why these are going to be coming out a little earlier than some of the other shows where they break down the fights. I just kind of want to keep that theme going. So I'm making sure I'm not, it's very easy to accidentally kind of repeat things you hear if you're not giving your first opinion. So I think that's important. So anyways, moving on to the next fight. We have Joseph Benavidez versus Sergio Pettis. All right, so this should be a good fight. I think this will be a pretty typical action flyweight fight. And I think that this one will probably go to decision, and I think that it'll be entertaining. I would probably favor Joseph Benavidez. Just on first glance. My one comment would be on that. Joe, he has seemed to slow down a little bit. He didn't look super good in his last fight against Cejudo, which was all the way back in December. It was December 3rd of 2016. I wrote that date down. So that was his last fight, and he didn't look great in that fight. He won, but he arguably could. I don't remember. I think there was a point deduction for someone. Maybe it was for Cejudo for a groin kick. I think it was. It was a little bit of an odd fight the way that played out, and I remember the decision being kind of disputed. And but I also just remember Joe looking a little bit slower than he had before. He is almost 34 years old. He's going to turn 34 this summer. So, that would make sense. 34 is pretty old for a flyweight. Pettis, on the other hand, is a decade younger. He's only 24, or almost a full decade younger. So, Pettis is, he's the younger one. And when you're younger like that, you improve a lot more between each fight. Pettis, I do believe, got out wrestled by the aforementioned Henry Cejudo in his last fight. I don't remember which pay-per-view that was on right off the top of my head, but he got out-wrestled in that one and lost a very clear unanimous decision to Cejudo. So I'm sure he'll want to get back in the winning column. Sergio tends to bounce back pretty well from losses, I feel like. But I just think Joseph Benavidez might be the wrong opponent to try and bounce back from a loss against. Joseph's just a tough guy, and he's stamped himself pretty clearly over the years as the number 2 flyweight in the division, and if people don't remember, was initially kind of the favorite of that little 4-man tourney for the first flyweight title fight in UFC history, and he was kind of the favorite to beat Demetrius Johnson. So, I think he's pretty clearly the number 2 guy in the division, and I think he will win this fight by decision, using some wrestling and striking, mixing it up, and kind of keeping Sergio hesitating because of being worried about the takedown. So my pick is Joseph Benavidez by unanimous decision. I do think that if he comes out looking significantly slowed down over the long year and a half layoff that he's had. If he comes out looking significantly slower or older, or for some reason all of a sudden seems to not be as durable or as offensive minded, he could potentially lose a decision, but I expect him to come back in and do a good job here and take the decision. So let's see what the odds are on this one. And once again, I do not have prop bets available. Sorry if the volume's going up and down. I keep not being close enough to the microphone. I'm still getting used to recording. Okay, so Joseph Benavidez is the favorite at minus 250, and Sergio Pettis is the underdog at plus 210. And that's pretty unanimous across the board. Those are the minus 245 is the best odds you can get Joseph Benavidez at, and plus you want the underdog to be higher. Plus 210 is the best odds you get Sergio Pettis at. I wouldn't bet on that at all. I don't think that's I think that's too much of a favorite to be worth betting money on Joseph. I'm also not a gambler, so I find the odds interesting, and I like to see what the sports books think. So I wouldn't bet on that fight, but Sergio Pettis, you can get him at plus 210 on 5 dimes if you think that he has what it takes to pull the upset, and if you think that there's a chance that Joseph Benavidez coming off this long layout is going to look significantly worse. Although, up until this point, he's shown that he's the clear number 2 in the division. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next fight on the card. The next fight on the card is Rashad Evans versus Anthony Lionheart Smith. Anthony Smith, I believe, lost his last fight to Thiago Santos by knockout, or maybe it was a submission once he was already hurt. I believe it was knockout, though. Rashad Evans, he did get finished by Glover Teixeira a while back, but since then he's just lost some lackluster decisions to Dan Kelly and Sam Alvey. There could be one more in there somewhere that I'm forgetting, but I don't think so. I think his last fight was a loss to Sam Alvey. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I know his last fight was not a win. I can guarantee you that. If he has lost another fight other than the Sam Alvey fight, it was another lackluster decision. It wasn't a scary knockout where everyone's worried about him, but it also definitely wasn't him winning. So, and I believe this is at 205. I believe Anthony Smith was at 185 in his last outing, but I think he said he was going to move up, and I think that Rashad Evans has already moved back to 205 and is not planning on going down. I hope I'm right about this. I don't have a bunch of tabs open in front of me. I just put down a couple little notes about dates of last fights. That was really the only thing I wrote down. So, all right, let's see. My opinion about this fight, that's where I'm going with this. My opinion about this fight is that I think it's going to be kind of sad and depressing. I don't think Rashad's going to pull the trigger. I think he's just going to back up and I just don't think he's going to be offensive at all, and I really just think it's up to Anthony Smith whether this ends up being a lackluster decision win for him or whether he goes after it and tries to get the KO TKO finish. So unfortunately, I love Rashad. I've enjoyed his career a lot. I just think that he has I think he's done his time in the sport, and I think he's good on the desk, and I'd like to see him transition more into that, but it's not up to me to tell him what to do with his life. He's a grown man. So I do think, however, that he will lose this fight, and it will definitely hurt my heart a little bit to watch. So let's look at the odds. Oh, wow. Okay, see, this is why it's fun to look at the odds for the first time together. Anthony Smith is minus 335 favorite on 5 dimes. Anthony Smith, coming off a knockout loss, is favored that highly to beat Rashad Evans. Think about what that means. Okay, so I'm not the only one thinking that this is probably going to be a disappointing night if you're a longtime Rashad Evans fan. Rashad Evans is at plus 275. I would not bet on him. Obviously, I think when he was more in his prime, he would smoke Anthony Smith, but especially at 205, not cutting all that weight. But I just don't really think that that's going to be I don't think it's going to be the outcome. So I wouldn't bet on this fight at all. Just minus 335 to me just really isn't worth the comeback you would get on that on Anthony Smith. So, and honestly, I would feel guilty making money off of Rashad Evans losing because I have a lot of admiration for that guy. So we're going to move on from that fight to, let's see what we got next. We have Rashad Coulter and Chris, I believe it's De La Rocha. Once again, another one I'm just going to go over. I'm familiar with both these guys. I'm actually very familiar with Rashad Coulter. I saw some of his. Of course I'm going to forget what it was. It was either Legacy or LFA, but I'm just not really into heavyweight MMA. Heavyweight MMA is my least favorite. I love Stipe. I love the smaller guys that have more athleticism. But I love the Stipe DC fight. Very excited about that fight, but not really into the more mid and lower depths of the heavyweight division. Just not really my style. I like the lighter weight classes, bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight being my favorites. So I'm just going to gloss over this one. I never bet on heavyweight MMA. It's just not, it doesn't work out for you. It's so unpredictable. I mean, Alistair Overeem got slept by Ben Rothwell back in the day in the first, I think, 90 seconds of the fight. Definitely the first round. I think it was like the first 90 seconds, and I would have never called that. So, all right, next. You've got Mirsad, I think you say it Bektik, I think. I definitely am a fan of this guy, but I feel like I've heard people say his name differently in different places. But I'm going to go with Mirsad Bektik, and that's versus Ricardo Lamas, who is a longtime top 10 fighter in the UFC featherweight division. Bektik, I'm not sure what he's ranked at this point. In the future, see, this is a work in progress. I'll add more details to this and have a better idea of where people are ranked and stuff. But okay, so going through this fight, Bektik, he coming off a win in his last fight. I think it was against Gato Freo Pepe, I believe. I know it was a vicious knee right to the solar plexus that, no, it wasn't a knee. It was a punch, I believe, to the solar plexus. I believe it was a body shot. So it was, it was a knee. So he won his last fight, and that was coming off of that loss to Darren Elkins, where Elkins came back and smashed him after losing badly for the first 2.5 rounds. So Bektik, he may have slight cardio and chin issues as evidenced by that fight, because it did seem like he got all of a sudden exhausted kind of out of nowhere. And then I believe that he did get clipped with like a head kick from Elkins and a couple punches, but nothing landed, so cleanly that you would just expect someone to be that hurt from it. He just seemed to be a little bit fragile, at least in that moment. Maybe part of it was from exhaustion. Ricardo Lamas isn't really a very good guy to be fragile against. He in UFC's first trip, I think it was Mexico City with supposed to be Kane. It ended up being Verdum versus Hunt. Lamas had that jab knockdown of Dennis Bermudez, and then wrapped him up in I think it was maybe a guillotine or darce or something, but finished him off after knocking him down. So Lamas isn't the guy that you want to be at all fragile against. Lamas is coming off a really bad KO loss, though, to Josh Emmett. It was a scary KO loss. So that was a rough one to watch, although obviously quite a highlight for Josh Emmett. So Lamas, who knows what demons he has coming back, but he's come back from knockout losses in the past. In WEC, he got knocked out bad by the guy from Team Alpha Male, Danny. Last Call. I can't think of his last name at the moment, but you know who I'm talking about. He knocked out Lamas very bad. Danny Castillo. He knocked out Lamas really bad back in the day in WEC, and Lamas came back from that just fine. And he came back from the Aldo fight where he got kind of just outclassed and leg kicked to death. So I've got faith in Lamas. He's been finished a few times in his career. Chad Mendez got him with more of a TKO, but he was definitely kind of out on his feet and out in those little scrambles they had towards the end when Chad got behind him and was punching him, and then looked up at the ref to stop it. So Lamas can be hurt, but Bektik, I think Bektik would be more likely to win a decision if he wins this fight, and I think that if Lamas wins it, I think he's likely to win it by KO or TKO, or kind of a club and sub type deal where he gets the knockdown and then gets the neck. So that would be my thoughts. I'd probably say Bektik by unanimous decision if I had to guess, especially if that last knockout loss affected Ricardo Lamas. So let's look at the odds. Okay. Let's see. Ricardo Lamas is the underdog at plus 170, and Mirsad Bektik is the favorite at minus 200. So I feel like that reflects relatively accurately what I have to say. I do think that Lamas has the opportunity, which is why he's not a huge underdog, just plus 170. He is known for being quite the opportunist and snatching up submissions and knockdowns out of kind of nowhere in a way. He's always in a fight until the end. Even that Holloway fight, he stood and traded toe-to-toe for that last 10 seconds, and that epic throwdown Holloway gave him, and he was in there. He was still going for it, so he's not the type of guy who's going to just go away without a fight. I don't. His chin could be still compromised from the knockout loss to Emmett. I don't remember exactly when that was. I know it was in Winnipeg. It was when Lawler beat. Lawler lost to Dos Anjos when RDA beat Dos Anjos. So we'll get to RDA in a minute. So okay, that was when that was. So it was a while ago. He has had some time to recover, but that was a bad knockout. So we'll see. I wouldn't bet on this fight, but I'm probably going to tell you about almost every fight. It will be very rare that I tell you, ooh, I would bet on this fight. That's not going to happen very often. I'm not a gambler, but there are times where I spot odds that I know have to be wrong. Back in the day, I obviously didn't have a show back then, seeing I just started this, but there's been a few along the way, Holly Holm and Rousey, where I like most people, I did think that there was a good chance Rousey would win that fight by submission, but I also thought that the underdog odds for Holly Holm were just ridiculous. She shouldn't have been that big an underdog. So so. Anyways, I'll let you know if I see one that really stands out to me. All right, what do we got next? Let's try and move through this a little faster. I might be taking a little too long. Okay. Carla Esparza versus Claudia Gadelha. Okay. This one will be really quick. Nothing to see here, in my opinion. Gadelha is way too athletic, way too strong. She might gas out in the later round, or the last round, the third round. It's only 3-round fight. She might gas out, but I feel like if she does gas out, it'll be with a 2-0 lead, and Carla Esparza is not a finisher. So I've got Gadelha easily either finishing this fight by TKO, by submission, or winning by decision, probably being very tired at the end of the fight, unless she's worked on that a little bit. Although, in her last fight, part of this is based off her last fight where she got kind of beat down in, I think Singapore, maybe. No, it was before that one. Maybe, I think it was in Singapore. But anyways, against, no, see, I'm sorry. I got to stop trying to get all these things right. It's going to drive me crazy. It was on the OSP, the OSP card where you got the second Von Flue choke against the guy. Okay, all right. I got to stop doing this. Okay, so anyways, her last fight she got beat down by Jessica Andrade, and she looked very tired, but she was also fighting by far the strongest, most powerhouse hydrant of a girl in that division. I mean, Jessica Andrade is just an absolute tank. So that's nothing to be ashamed of. So yeah, I think Gadelha gets the win here pretty easy. Let's look at the odds. And kind of reflecting what I'm saying, Claudia Gadelha, I'm just going to go through the 5 dimes odds for these. Those tend to be the best odds in my opinion looking down this. So you can get her for minus 550, which is a terrible odds to bet money on. It's a huge favorite for Gadelha, kind of like I'm saying, kind of my opinion is what is reflected in these odds is what I'm getting at. So I wouldn't bet on this fight. Carla Esparza is at plus 425, in my opinion, rightfully so. Big underdog there. So yeah, that's the highest you can get her, and the lowest you can get Gadelha is minus 475 on Bookmaker. So still wouldn't bet money on that at all. So we're gonna move on here to Curtis Blades versus Alistair Overeem. Okay, so a lot of people get really excited about heavyweight MMA. I've already told you earlier on one of the undercard fights with Rashad Coulter that I'm not really a big fan of heavyweight MMA, and never really going to be the division I get that excited about unless you're giving me Daniel Cormier. So Blades versus Overeem, I think this is actually going to be a kind of boring, disappointing fight. I think this might be a 3-round stinker. I think Overeem's just going to keep his distance and throw very little, and he's very hard to get close to if he's not being offensive, and I think that Blades is kind of going to get stuck on the outside, and I'm not sure if he's going to be able to get in for takedowns, and I just think it's going to be a very slow-paced, kind of weird fight, but hopefully I'm wrong and it's more exciting than that. I love Overeem, but I'd like to see Blaydes get the win here and keep moving up the ladder. At heavyweight, we need young blood up there. So and I feel like if Blaydes just goes for it, he could actually maybe get a KO if he just swings and clips Alistair. I mean, Alistair does have a tendency to sometimes get caught with the more wild punches. The less orthodox punches seem to be the ones that trouble him. Ngannou's uppercut, Ben Rothwell kind of just clubbing him. He does seem to struggle with those hard to see, just kind of wild shots. He definitely doesn't have the most solid chin. He's a very good fighter, but that chin is definitely not his greatest attribute. So Blaydes could potentially do that, but I don't think he's going to open up that much because I think he's a really intelligent fighter, and I think he's cautious. So I think he's going to try and get a decision, but I actually could see potentially it backfiring on him because I could see Blaydes trying to be patient and just settle for a decision so he doesn't have to open up too much and let the veteran catch him with something big. But I think in his inexperience, he's not going to realize that Overeem is slowly eking the fight out and slowly stealing it from him, just like he did to Fabricio Verdum. And even though he got battered in the last round, he still hung on to that lead. And, I think that Overeem might kind of get him with that veteran, letting him, think he's in the fight and think he's winning, but he's just really not quite scoring the points and being as smooth as Overeem is for the judges. So I think Overeem could win this by decision. I don't think it'll be super fun. All right, let's look at the odds. Alistair Overeem is actually the underdog at plus 158, so I guess I may be a little off here on my opinion. We'll have to see what happens. Hopefully I'll be able to do a recap show for some of these, and we'll go over my, I'll listen back to what I had to say before and talk about it and see where we went wrong and talk about what may have occurred. So Curtis Blaydes is the favorite at minus 180. You can get him as low as minus 170, and you can get Overeem. The highest is plus 158. Five Dimes seems to give out by far the best underdog odds. Just mentioning that here. So I don't think plus 158 is really worth betting money on, but and especially considering that Alistair could just get clipped, or maybe I'm totally wrong and he will get dominantly wrestled by Blaydes. But I wouldn't bet on that. But anyways, Overeem is the underdog, so they clearly have a different opinion than I do off the first glance. All right, so we're gonna move on to next CM Punk versus Mike Jackson. All right, this is honestly a stupid fight. This annoys the heck out of me. I don't care about WWE. I do respect it, and I do think if it entertains people, that's great. And I know those guys are athletes, and they do have to work very hard for that. It's a very dangerous job. But I don't care about CM Punk, and give me Brock Lesnar. He was a D1 wrestler. Give me someone, more than that. He was national champion at least twice. Give me someone like that. I'm not interested in someone who's literally just an entertainer who's trained for a couple years. That's not that interesting to me, and he's making a bunch of money off his name, and I just not really understanding why it's on the main card other than the obvious fact that it's business. I do respect him for giving this another go after getting his ass kicked. I respect him a lot more the second time around, and I actually do have a lot of respect for Mike Jackson. I don't think that he's UFC caliber, but I do think that he's put in his time in combat sports, and I think he's a really well-spoken, intelligent guy. So, as much as I know CM Punk's got this cool middle-aged dream thing going on, I'm going to have to cheer for Mike Jackson here just because I feel like, hey, like his nickname, the dude's the truth. I just feel like he's a good, straight-up dude, and I like when I hear him talk, I feel like he's a well-spoken guy, and, he's put in some time in the sport and in boxing and kickboxing, and, he's had his fights, so I'm rooting for him. I think he's going to win this fight. I honestly think it might end up going to a decision just because I don't think he's a nasty finisher like Gall is. I don't think he's just going to come out and just try and murder CM Punk. I think Punk's going to come out a lot more cautious than that weird foot-to-foot gallop. Oh my God. I'm sorry, I just laughed in the mic somewhere. He did that gallop, if anyone remembers that. He galloped bringing his feet together as he bounced across the cage to get immediately double-legged by Mickey Gall, and it was hilarious. I was laughing so hard on the couch, I was crying when I watched that. So hopefully he won't do that again. Let's look at the odds. Mike Jackson is the favorite at minus 235, and CM Punk is the favorite at plus 195. Honestly, if I wanted to bet on that fight, I wouldn't. But if I wanted to, I would just bet on Mike Jackson. I mean, even at that decent of a favorite, I think he's going to win this fight pretty easily. So we'll see. But I think it'll probably be by decision, and I think it will be one of those fights where the interest factor wears off if you're like me pretty much immediately and you're waiting for it to be done, or if you are interested in it, I think the interest factor goes away after, half a round, and then I think it just becomes a low-level MMA fight on a high-level MMA card, and will honestly probably draw some boos from the crowd and be not particularly be great. But hopefully Mike Jackson does have what it takes to go after it. So hopefully if there's some boos, Mike Jackson just realizes that he's not in too much danger and pushes the pace and tries to get Punk out of there. That would be fun to see. So I'm rooting for Mike Jackson, and I hope he puts on a show. I've got a little faith in him, to more at least than I do in Punk, to put on a show. So yeah. So anyways, that's the odds. We're going to move on to the next fight. Andrei Arlovsky versus Tai Tuivasa. Tai is best known for his shoey after his win in Perth on the Rockhold Romero it was on the pay-per-view. Yeah, the Rockhold Romero card. That's what he's best known for. He did an epic shoey outside of the cage. He's been talking about how he's going to do a shoey inside the cage using Joe Rogan's dirtiest, sweatiest shoe. Obviously, I'm sure he's joking about that, but it's hilarious to listen to him talk. The dude's quite the character. He does this awesome dance after he wins. He's hilarious. He's surprisingly young. I don't have his age right in front of me, but I want to say he's definitely, I know for a fact he's in his mid to early 20s. I want to say he might even be like 24. He's got some potential. He could maybe take the reins from Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt's towards the end of his career at this point, so hopefully he'll be kind of the next Mark Hunt for everyone. Just a lovable, big old dude who knocks people silly. So I love Andrei Arlovsky, but he's had his ups, and then he's had his downs, and then his comebacks, and then his downs, and then his comebacks, and good for him. But I'm ready to see some young blood get to the top of the division. So if Arlovsky does win, I hope it's one of those wily veteran wins where he outsmarts Tai and mixes in a little wrestling like he did in his last fight against Struve, and takes the decision, and Tai learns some lessons from it. I definitely do not hope he clips Tai and knocks him out, although I think Tai could probably get hit by a freight train and still be standing. He doesn't look like the type of dude who's chinny. So, anyways, I think Ty's going to win this fight by KO, and then do a shoey, not inside the octagon like we're all hoping for, but I think outside the octagon. Shortly after he gets out, he will have a shoey from the crowd. There'll be some crazy Australian fans there waiting for him. So, Ty by KO and signature finishing move, shoey. Let's look at the odds. Let's see if we could find this one anywhere. Where is this? Okay, Tai Tuivasa is the favorite, minus 275. And you can get him as low as 269. And Andrei Arlovsky's the underdog at plus 235. You can get him as high as plus 241. Don't bet on heavyweight MMA. In my opinion, I don't think that that's a good idea. So I wouldn't bet on this, even though I'm more interested in it than the other two heavyweight fights we've talked about. Although, actually not necessarily, because definitely interested in where Curtis Blades goes. So I shouldn't have said that. But I am interested in this fight, despite my letting y'all know that I'm not a huge fan of heavyweight MMA. So I am still interested in this. I do think Ty will win. I wouldn't bet on it, though. All right, let's move on. Okay, next up, we have Megan Anderson versus Holly Holm, or I should say Holly Holm versus Megan Anderson. Megan Anderson coming over Invicta, a featherweight champion. This is at featherweight, just so everyone knows. Obviously, Holm's the former bantamweight champion, so this one's at 145 featherweight. All right, so what do I have to say about this fight? I am a fan of Invicta. But I have only seen those fights one time. I did see Megan Anderson knock out Charmaine Tweet, but I only saw it one time. I haven't watched it bunch of times like I have a lot of UFC fights, so I'm not super familiar with her game, and to be honest, she's so young and she hasn't fought in a while, so she's probably twice as good as she was last time. So I don't really know what to think about her. And another reason I don't know what to think about her is the same reason that I can compare her to Jose Shorty Torres from last weekend, which is kind of funny because they don't look at all alike, and they're, different genders and different divisions and different styles. It doesn't seem like there should be a comparison, but there is, because Jose Shorty Torres is, everyone, was so psyched on him getting to the UFC, and I think he'll do well, and I definitely was interested in it too, but, you can't tell how good someone is until they go up against top-level competition, and that's the tricky thing. And with Jose Torres, he came out against Jared Brooks, and he didn't look, he did have to cut a lot of weight. It was a short-notice fight, so hopefully he'll look a lot better in his second fight. He probably had some jitters too, so I'm definitely giving him a pass here, but I'm just saying he didn't look like some super dominant phenom coming over to the UFC. And Eddie Alvarez came over and got beat up by Cowboy after having a strong first round. So Cowboy came back and beat him up. So you never really know what you're dealing with until guys get in the UFC, and a lot of times their first UFC fight is not their best. Like Eddie Alvarez, that was not his best performance, and like Jose Torres, I'm sure that wasn't his best performance, and he ended up getting the win. Kind of an odd situation with the slam. You've probably seen it on the Sports Center. It's been all over there. So that's that self knockout kind of slam where he landed, where the other guy Jared Brooks landed on his head. But so, Megan Anderson to me is kind of like that. I don't know exactly what to make of her yet. I haven't seen her fight top flight competition. I have not seen that from her. I have not seen her make her UFC debut yet. I don't know what her nerves will be like. I don't know how she'll perform. I also haven't seen her compete in quite a while. I don't remember exactly when her last fight but I know it was a while ago, and she's been waiting to get started in the UFC, and she's probably improved a lot. She's 28 years old, so she is younger. She probably hits harder than Holly Holm, but get this, Holly Holm is she's 36 now, which is I didn't know she was that old. I looked that up. I thought she was like maybe 32 or 33 for some reason. She's 36, so she's gonna have to start slowing down at some point. I feel like she still looks good, but and to be honest, I feel like she can win a decision over Megan Anderson. I think she will get the better of Megan Anderson in this fight. I am picking her to win by decision in just kind of a veteran performance, which seems to be a theme of my thought process on this podcast today. So, but anyways, unless she is slowed down majorly, which she is 36, I don't think that she's going to lose this fight. I think she'll win a decision, but if she has slowed down majorly and looks at all fragile from the Cyborg fight, although she hung in there the whole 5 rounds and did pretty well, but if that some of that damage did wear on her and she is slowing down due to age, then Megan Anderson could win by TKO. That's a possibility. And also it's a possibility if a combination of what I previously mentioned or just this happens, which what could happen is Megan Anderson could show up and look 10 times better than she did in the last fight, because she's only 28 and she hasn't fought in a while, and I'm sure she keeps getting better every fight. That's what it seems like to me. So she could be way better, and she could be super switched on and have no jitters, and she could beat Holm maybe by TKO, or maybe she could win a decision if she's just pushing Holm back the whole fight and being super aggressive and Holm can't get anything going. But unless Holm has deteriorated a lot and gets clipped or something, I just don't really see that happening. So I'm going to have to go with Holm by unanimous decision. Let's look at the odds. All right. Holly Holm is the favorite at minus 230, and Megan Anderson is the underdog at plus 190, I believe. Yes. Sorry, I had to get a sip of water. I've been talking for a while. I need to get a little faster at these. I said I was going to be quick. Holly Holm. Yeah, so Holly Holm, pretty decent favorite there. Megan Anderson, pretty decent underdog there. I wouldn't bet on that fight. I got Holm by decision, though. Anyways, let's move on to RDA versus Colby, the stereotypical bully from an 80s movie, Covington. All right. First off, shout out to Colby Covington because he's having a lot of fun, and I do think that his shtick is getting under people's skin, and I find it amusing. I don't like superhero movies, and I don't like the new Star Wars movies. I only like the original 3 because I'm, I guess, a grouchy old man, even though I'm only 26. So I don't like the new Star Wars movies. I don't want to go watch the Avengers, so I think his spoilers are hilarious, but he's definitely rubbed some people the wrong way. He's definitely said some stuff that's super sensitive people think is racist. I think it's just kind of him being a dumb character, but I don't think that he's a racist at all. But MMA is a very diverse sport, and his best friend is Cuban. So, I don't think he's a racist, but I do think that he's rubbed people the wrong way. But he's getting attention for himself, and that's what you got to do in this sport, because you're getting punched in the head, and you're not getting paid that much money, and you're not going to be set for life when you're done with this, unless you make a name for yourself and do well, or just get famous through it. And even if you never do reach the highest pinnacle of the sport, kind of like Chael Sonnen. I mean, he's super successful just from how well he promoted himself, and he's awesome at his job with Bellator, and he's still a pretty decent fighter in his right, but he never held the belt, and he still made a big name for himself. So you got to do what you got to do. I don't hate Colby for it, but with that being said, RDA is going to light him up on the feet bad. RDA throws vicious combinations, vicious low kicks. He's incorporated that just downright nasty, should possibly be illegal, just kidding, calf kick that everyone's using now, which just makes me cringe, because I still train. I still do train a little bit of boxing every now and then. I don't compete or anything, but I do still go to the gym and work some mitts and bag, and I do spar still, but I don't do any MMA sparring. I haven't done any MMA sparring in probably 2 years at this point. So no one was doing the calf kick the last time I did shin guard glove sparring with takedowns. And the last time I did that, no one was kicking the calf, and I don't even know how you would do that in sparring, because after a couple of those calf kicks, dudes seem to just be hobbled, and women. It's a nasty kick. So RDA is going to murder him on the feet. But RDA did experience a phenomenon known as Khabib Time back in 2014. And if Colby Covington could give him flashbacks of Khabib Time by just mauling him against the fence and taking him down and wearing him out, that could possibly really, really screw with RDA and get the best of him. One thing that I don't know is, does RDA even care about that fight anymore? That was a while ago. Does he look back at that as a frustrating experience or as a horrifying claustrophobic experience like Edson Barboza probably does? Guys look at those fights, those losses in different ways, and they rationalize them to themselves in different ways. So, is he going to get frustrated and off his game if he just can't get Colby off of him and is getting taken down over and over? As long as they're on the feet, RDA is going to be vicious, and he's going to be landing at will, landing those low kicks. Colby, he goes for it. The dude's not gun shy. He doesn't overthink it. Kamaru Usman and him get talked about in the same conversation a lot because of their beef and their similar ages and paths up the division, and similar opponents. But Kamaru Usman thinks way too hard when he's striking. He overthinks everything. He hesitates. And it's not because he's not a really tough, athletic, awesome fighter. It's just because he's still getting used to it. Colby is just one of those guys who just kind of goes for it to the point where he's getting sloppy and getting tagged by Damian Maia, getting a cut. I mean, how many guys does Damian Maia cut up on the feet? Damian Maia split his eyebrow open, but Colby's just willing to go for it, which I like to see personally. I'd rather see a guy just going for it than a guy who won't throw and's overthinking it, trying to only land the perfect punches. You got to go for it. It's a fight. So I like that from Colby, but it could get him in trouble against RDA, because RDA is one of those guys who, while pressuring you and lighting you up, can also counterpunch off of your counter punches. When you're trying to swing back at him, he can counter you while pressuring you back. He's just vicious on the feet, and he's gotten so much better. And those low kicks could be a huge factor. I think that RDA I don't think Colby can just wrestle mug RDA for 25 minutes. I think that RDA is going to have a lot of success when on the feet, and shooting a double leg gets a lot harder if your legs are all chewed up from low kicks. So I think RDA may end up TKOing him, maybe a club and sub type deal, like I mentioned earlier in the Lamas fight. I like using that term, but basically knockdown to submission, possibly a front choke of some type, guillotine Dars, maybe take the back and get the rear naked. But I don't think he'll submit Colby just off of a takedown and submission. I think if he submits Colby, it'll be off of Colby being hurt. He might even just KO him. I'm not sure how good Colby's chin is if he's just getting lit up like Robbie Lawler did along the fence. Oh, we got to talk about something real quick before I get to the odds on this one. People don't understand how exhausting it is to throw a gajillion punches in a row and then have to keep doing something. People who have not done that have no idea how tiring that is. Just hitting a bag, not even throwing full power for a minute straight. Just fast punches, and then stop. Your arms feel tired. RDA did that to Robbie Lawler up against the fence in, I think, maybe the second round, and then was just fine for the rest of the fight. I thought for sure he was going to gas out. He threw like 80 punches in that flurry or something insane. And I don't think that Colby has the experience and the veteran savvy that Lawler has to survive an onslaught like that. So I think Colby might be getting taken out of there and might be looking a little bit dumb come Sunday morning after everything he's had to say. But we'll see. If Colby wins, unless he just shocks me, I think it's going to be a wrestle muggin, and he probably still only win 3 of the rounds, and he'll have to show some serious toughness in the times that RDA is doing well. But I've got RDA by TKO. I'm not really sure what round I think RDA is going to win in. It could be surprisingly early if Colby has just never been dealt with someone like this, like I suspect. But if Colby's been sparring with the right guys and his coaches and him are acknowledging what he's in for on the feet, and how much a level above RDA is than him in the striking department. If his coaches and him are truly recognizing that, despite all the cocky talk, if in the gym they're acknowledging RDA is on a totally different level than us on the feet, then he could be more likely to hang in there. But if he thinks this is going to be a cakewalk and he starts getting lit up by RDA, he could easily be out of there in the first 2 rounds. I've got RDA by TKO. I'll compromise and say round 3. Okay, so let's look at the odds for that one. Okay, RDA, where is he at? There we go. Okay. Rafael dos Anjos, RDA, as I like to call him, as everyone likes to call him, is at minus 120. Lowest odds, minus 117. Favorite. Colby Covington can be found at plus 100 or minus 105 or plus 103. That's just a pick 'em fight, basically. I guess you could put some money on RDA if I had the prop bets like I hope to have for you in the future. Next time I'll print them out, and instead of just looking back and forth. And I'm trying to also look at them one at a time. So if I print them out, then because I want to have my first reaction. So if I can print them out, I can put another piece of paper over the ones that I'm not to yet or something like that. I don't know, but we'll get used to this over time. But Colby Covington, slight underdog. Rafael dos Anjos, slight favorite. Not really worth betting on. It's just a pick 'em, but at pick 'em odds, if you wanted to bet, I would absolutely pick RDA. If they're just going to be giving us basically even odds, you'd have to give me Colby at a 2-1 underdog for me to want to put any money on him hanging in there with RDA. Okay, let's move on to the next fight. Robert Whittaker versus Yoel Romero in a middleweight title rematch from last summer. Okay, Whittaker has not fought since then. He had a knee injury. He did not have surgery, if I'm correct. He did extensive rehabilitation. He also had the chicken pox and like the flu and maybe some diabetes. I'm just kidding, but he had a bunch of different crazy stuff, and I'm not kidding about the chicken pox. He did have that, and he was sick with something else too. Oh, crazy staph infection. Yeah, he had a crazy staph infection and the chicken pox. Like, poor guy. And he had another kid. Feel bad for him there. So he's got like 5 of those things now. So, yeah, Robert Whittaker's been out. Yoel Romero has fought once since then, and he had that vicious knockout of Luke Rockhold. He did miss weight for that fight, but he's made weight for like 25 years now of his life. He's a professional. I think it was just because they moved his fight to like 2 weeks. It was either 1 week or 2 weeks earlier because he was supposed to be fighting Branch in Florida, and then they moved him down to Perth, and he had to travel, and he he was all of a sudden behind on schedule for making weight. I don't think that that's going to play a factor in this fight at all. This fight's been scheduled for a while now. So let's ignore that whole weight thing. I'm not making a big deal about that to me. Okay, but let's get to the fight. This is a bad style matchup for Yoel Romero. Robert Whittaker is impossible to control. He can be briefly taken down, but like to the point where he's hip heisting with a hand on the ground. I mean, he's not just getting laid on. That's not happening. And he's just so hard to hold down. He's not just settling on the ground. He's going to spring up the second you try and take him down. So now we're basically left, in my opinion, with a striking match. Oh, by the way, he was going to wrestle like the Worlds or something for Australia, or New Zealand, one of those teams. But the UFC said no, because they're like, dude, you can't be getting hurt for doing a Worlds wrestling tournament when we have your big fight this summer. That's not happening, which makes sense from the UFC's point of view. But my point is, Whittaker can wrestle. Like, this isn't a coincidence that he's hard to hold down. It's not a coincidence that he got Jacare off of him and then got the knockout after having some adversity in the first round with being briefly controlled. Okay, so what does Yoel have to offer? He has a very strange prison style, like, what is it called, 52 blocks or something. He's got this weird style of fighting where he's just moving his hands around and doing these weird parries and just sitting there waiting and just moving slowly back and forth. It's very odd style, and it's very good for his body type. He's an explosive athlete, so he recharges in between his bursts, and it like a video game meter, and it's so smart of him. So he's got a great style for his body type and his age and his athletic advantages with the explosiveness. But the issue with that style is that it's not a good style to fight Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker is not Luke Rockhold. He is not chinny. He doesn't back up with his chin sticking up in the air and get hit by every single left hook anyone's ever thrown at him. That's not what he does. He has great fundamentals. He has good defense. And he also doesn't get tired. He just seems to be pretty tireless. In that last fight, he injured his knee. His last fight against Yoel Romero last summer, he injured his knee in the first round. He'd injured it during camp, before the fight, and Yoel landed one of those John Jones-style stomp kicks to it in the first round. It was like in the first 2 minutes, and his knee was screwed. He said he said, my knee is trash, to his corner, and they were able to keep him in there, rightfully so. It wasn't a situation where I thought that they should have called the fight. And he hung in there and he won. And that, if he can do that in that condition, I feel like he's only better now. He's young. He's like 26 years old, and Yoel's, I think, is 41. Rob's young, and he's only getting better. And his rehab, I saw some videos of him doing different rehab stuff and everything, and he looks great. I think he's going to come in here in phenomenal shape. I don't think he's going to get tired. I don't think that he's going to have another injury. I don't think he's just likely to get injured in this fight again. I think the last fight he got injured because he had a nagging kind of small injury during the fight as it started, and then that injury was compounded upon by Yoel's kick to his knee. I don't think that Robert Whittaker's fragile and gets injured every time he gets hit with something, so I'm not worried about that at all. And I think that Rob can at least win a unanimous decision, and I think it's very likely that if he goes after Yoel, he gets him out of there. There was a couple moments where he really did start to kind of light up Yoel, but he did have to be cautious, and he did have that hurt knee, and I think he's just going to come out here even better, in even better shape, not injured, no complications, and I think he might get Yoel out of there. And I'm a big Yoel fan, and he could always have a giant explosive moment where he catches Whittaker with something that has us saying what just happened for the next minute until we see the replay. He's likely to do that. I mean, he could do what he did to Chris Weidman. He could do, although not really, because Whittaker's not going to shoot in on him, I don't think, but he could catch him with something huge. But I don't think Whittaker's that guy. I don't think he's that guy just to get taken out with some giant explosive strike. I think he's too smart for that. I think he retains his belt. All right, the odds say that Yoel Romero is the underdog at plus 200. You can get him as high as plus 206. And Robert Whittaker is at minus 240. You can get him as low as minus 225. Like I said, I don't really bet on fights. I'll tell you if there's something worth betting on, if it's really worth betting on. To me, none of these so far have really been that worth betting on today. So Yeah, so I've got Robert Whittaker. Yoel is kind of hard to just put it on, but the thing is I think we haven't even seen the best Robert Whittaker yet. So I am going to go ahead and say officially that Robert Whittaker by TKO, and I think it will come in the late fourth or early fifth round. So that's what I've got here. I hope you all enjoy the fights, and hopefully I can get back on here and do a little recap afterwards.